European leaders conclude a visit to the interim capital, Aden. The United Nations says that the number of displaced people in Yemen is increasing. Government accuses the Houthis of seizing lands and killing farmers in Hodeidah. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. Head of the Presidential Leadership Council, Rashad Al-Alimi, met with the Security and Military Committee. During the meeting, the committee delivered its final report and field plan to the President and briefed him about the support required to complete their work in future. Al-Alimi praised the efforts of the committee in accomplishing the tasks assigned to it under the declaration of the transfer of power. The Minister of Defense, General Mohsen El-Dari, signed with the UAE Minister of Justice an agreement on military and security cooperation in combating terrorism. The agreement reflects the two parties' interest in mutual cooperation to maintain security, peace, and stability in Yemen. During the meeting, the two sides discussed joint coordination in the defense and military fields. A massive fire erupted in a commercial store in Ib Governorate. Local sources said the fire broke out in a commercial store and spread to nearby shops, causing great material losses. According to the sources, at least one civilian was killed and several others injured due to the fire. Sources added that an electrical error is likely to have caused the fire. EU ambassador to Yemen and a number of European diplomats concluded a visit to Aden yesterday. During the visit, the EU diplomats met head of the Presidential Leadership Council, Rashad Al-Alimi, and reiterated strong support to PLC unity in this critical moment. They also praised the PLC commitment to achieving a lasting and inclusive political settlement and improving the economy of the country. The United Kingdom called on Yemen's warring parties to take practical steps to spare the population danger of mines and explosive devices. Richard Oppenheim, the British ambassador to Yemen, urged all parties to facilitate the work of the United Nations mission to support the Hodeidah Agreement and to take concrete steps to dismantle and identify landmines. Oppenheim expressed concern about the growing danger of landmines on the civilians in the country. Yemen participated in a meeting for sustainable development goals in the Arab region held at the Arab League in Cairo. The meeting focused on a number of issues, including eradicating hunger in the Arab world and achieving sustainable development in countries affected by the conflict. The United Nations warned that the number of displaced people in Yemen is in a constant increase. This comes amid cuts announced by international aid agencies due to funding crisis, which in turn add to the troubles of the displaced people. The following report has more on this.
Yemen currently has the fourth largest IDP population worldwide due to conflict. After 8 years of war, there are more than 1,220 camps and gatherings for the displaced. of which 774 are in government-controlled areas, according to the Executive Unit for the Management of Displaced Camps. In the liberated districts of Hajja Governorate, more than 4,200 families, including 1,200 displaced families, live in 67 internal displacement sites, in a very difficult humanitarian situation. As a result of the rains and winds that regularly wreck their shelters, most families resort to building huts more than twice a year and live in decrepit tents.
I've been displaced from Harad district since the beginning of the war. I keep getting relocated to different displacement sites due to the war. I can't find work and there are no employment opportunities. God only knows how hard we are battling. Organizations have provided no assistance.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees warned in October that more than two-thirds of the internally displaced persons in Yemen who are in urgent need of cash assistance to cover their essential needs will not receive this assistance due to poor funding. Such shortfalls will increase the suffering of IDPs and put their lives at risk, especially in light of the severe humanitarian crisis that the country as a whole is suffering from. In a recent report, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said, without further funding, 70% of the total 540,000 internally displaced people in Yemen who need this cash support to cover their basic needs will not receive this vital assistance, which may forcibly push them into poverty. The report added that the funding gap for UNHCR operations in Yemen, which is nearly double what it was a year ago, will force the organization to stop supplying essential cash assistance to 378,000 displaced people.
We've been displaced for 7 years, with no homes, tents, beds or blankets. We call on aid organizations to supply us with these basic necessities.
UNHCR noted that the funding shortfall would also deprive more than 68,000 refugees and asylum seekers in the country of access to life-saving health care. The report stresses that families in displacement camps in Yemen are already facing more severe food shortages than at any time in the past 3 years due to the rise in food prices and the reduction of humanitarian aid. Yemen is one of more than 20 countries around the world classified by the World Food Programme and the Food and Agricultural Organization as a hunger hotspot. Its population faces the most severe cases of food insecurity due to a mixture of overlapping local and international crises.
Protesters closed the doors of the Ministry of Higher Education in Aden after reports about corruption in grants and scholarships that angered local public opinion. Citizens organized a protest in front of the gate of the Ministry of Higher Education in Mansoura district in Aden, demanding an end to corruption and manipulation of scholarships. Displaced children in Yemen continue to struggle with having access to proper education. This comes when government officials monopolize education grants to their families and relatives, but deny ordinary citizens the right to compete for such grants. This following report gives more details.
A painful reality experienced by the Yemeni children in a war-torn country, where their school seats have been replaced by dirt, and classrooms are without walls or roofs to protect them from the intense heat and cold in the desert. They find themselves without a homeland and without educational facilities. On the other hand, the children of officials enjoy various scholarships for different countries and hard currency, and they had certificates granted according to sources after plundering state institutions that lack justice and law.
We are complaining from the crowded classrooms. We have very crowded classrooms due to the large amount of displaced people time after another. This could lead to the full closure of the school.
Leaked statements and papers reveal the ugly face of the Ministry of Higher Education and the frightening extent of the excessive exploitation of scholarships by state officials and political parties. This was met by great popular discontent among the society that suffers from the war, the deteriorating economic situation, and the poor living conditions. Government agencies in addition denied the wounded who sacrificed themselves defending the homeland the right to treatment. The salaries of the soldiers and the families of the martyrs and the wounded were absent. At the same time, more than $8 million were available for the children of officials who were sent abroad at the expense of humble people.
We suffer from wounds and we've traveled to Egypt but returned without any treatment. The officials do not pay the wounded soldiers. However, they pay for those going abroad for scholarships. We've suffered a lot in the war. I have been suffering since 4 years, while sons of officials are enjoying abroad. There is no care, salaries or treatment, and we become under the poverty line. As Yemenis, we've a great chunk of suffering, especially the youth and students. The lists of scholarship that was granted to senior officials and state leaders is a real scandal. Top-ranked students, at the same time, are struggling inside Yemen. The salaries of the officials are paid in dollars, while soldiers are finding no treatment or salaries to even pay the rent of their house.
This unique phenomenon revealed the extent of corruption pervading the joints of state institutions in Yemen. It reflects the fragmentation and stagnation that infiltrate the government for years, which prevented the good people from changing their lives for the better and leaving behind the circle of suffering in the country.
The Yemeni government accused the Houthi rebels of looting the lands of people. Recently, the rebels increased their attacks on civilian lands in Hodeidah Governorate. The following report has more details.
Houthis accused of killing 2 Yemeni farmers after land seizures protest. 2 Yemeni farmers have been killed by armed Houthis fighters and 3 more injured after protests against the rebels seizing their land were brutally suppressed. The government said that the Houthis had fired on farmers who had held a small demonstration after their land was seized by rebel authorities in Bajal area in the western Yemeni province of Hodeidah. It condemned in the strongest terms the Iran-sponsored Houthi terrorist militias firing on citizens who peacefully gathered to stop the looting of their lands and farms. The 2 innocent civilians, Hashim Ahmed Abaka and Maqbool Ahmed Abaka, were killed. One of the protesters appears to film the Houthis and points out that while they are armed, the farmers have no weapons and they are only carrying sticks. A number of farmers are seen gathering and shouting. Later on, shots are fired and the gathered farmers run away. Several are seen falling to the ground, dead or wounded. Some are heard screaming in pain. The government called the Houthis' cold-blooded killing of unarmed civilians came weeks after other land seizures in Hodeidah province. And it called on the United Nations and human rights groups to condemn the killing. Land monopoly, which is the source of making a living from, are no less crucial than killing innocent civilians who just defend their own properties.
Coming next. Warring parties in Yemen are silent amid reports of migrant abuse.
أنا خارج ألعب جهة أصحابي وهو الرمو علينا إن إحنا نرمو علي أصحابي صاروا يدعوا أصحاب المخيم بزين صاروا جايين. صعب إنه معي شيء رجل ما أقدرش ألعب مع أصحابي أو قد آخر ألعب بالليل.
أصلاً الولد ما لعب ما بدهم له أي حاجة، ولما يشوف أصحابه يلعبوا وهو برجل واحدة يتعقد الولد الحركات والصوت. هذا أثر علينا كلنا، الوالدة والوالد.
كنت قاعدة أنا حماصك، كنت ألعب كورة وأجري برجلي وألعب مع أصحابي، بعدين أبي صغير والآن ما أقدرش.
Welcome back. Thousands of migrants have departed from the Eastern African corridor into Yemen. They take car journeys facilitated by smugglers who subject them to dangers, including both journeys as an overcrowded, as well as exploitation, abuse, and violence. The following report has more details.
Recent communications from several United Nations experts to the Arab coalition and Houthis, the de facto authorities in much of Yemen, laid out a series of grave allegations of rights abuse against migrants and asylum seekers, including killing, torture, arbitrary detention, and sexual abuse. Unfortunately, both sides to Yemen's years-long conflict ignored the reports. In the October communications, which recently became public, the United Nations experts detailed reports of the Arab coalition apparently killing approximately 430 migrants and injuring 650 others in cross-border shelling and shooting between January and April. Captured migrants were allegedly tortured by the Arab coalition, with girls as young as 13 having reportedly been raped. The experts warned that women and girls are also at risk of sexual violence by smugglers who, collaborating with the Yemeni Immigration Passport and Nationality Authority (IPNA) under the control of Houthis, are extorting migrants. Migrants in an IPNA reception camp in the town of Munabeh are also supposedly subjected to forced labor, sexual exploitation, forced to traffic drugs, and other forms of abuse. Migrants who fail to pay smuggling fees or submit to exploitation are reportedly detained or forcibly returned to South Yemen. Most migrants passing through Yemen come from Ethiopia and include refugees and asylum seekers. Migrants transiting through Yemen are among the civilians most affected by the conflict. In 2021, Human Rights Watch documented scores of African migrants killed in a fire at a Houthi-controlled detention center. In 2020, Houthis and the Arab coalition killed and injured dozens of African migrants in the Saudi-Yemen borders area. According to the International Organization for Migration, over 43,000 migrants are stranded throughout Yemen. Following heavy arms twisting from the Arab coalition and the United Arab Emirates, the United Human Rights Council in 2021 shuttered the only international and independent body investigating abuses by all parties to the conflict in Yemen, despite repeated warnings about the impact this closure would have on human rights. These latest allegations underscore the need for the United Nations, either via the General Assembly or Human Rights Council, to establish a monitoring and investigative mechanism to gather evidence of possible war crimes by all sides.
Women's Development Research Center at Taz University organized an awareness event on electronic extortion. The event aims at introducing the issue of electronic extortion and ways to combat it, and to raise awareness of its dangers. The event included also many activities on cybercrime.
Violence against women is not only a verbal, psychological or physical one. There is also a new shape of its violence represented in the electronic violence or electronic extortion through social media. It's a dangerous phenomenon that has various causes and has dangerous consequences on the individual and the society. As we see in different media outlets, there are suicide cases and crimes related to this issue. So we found an opportunity in the research center to address this phenomenon and to raise awareness about its nature and causes.
The Japanese government decided to provide a new humanitarian aid package to Yemen. The Japanese aid comes in response to the urgent humanitarian needs arising from the conflict. It includes humanitarian projects in areas such as education, health, food, and protection of children and women. A Yemeni researcher revealed that a rare antique statue of a woman's head was sold at a public auction. The researcher confirmed that the statue was sold in the auction of ancient sculpture and works of art, which was held in London. This comes one day after the sale of one of the Yemen's most famous ancient murals called the Sheba mural. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. European leaders conclude a visit to the interim capital, Aden. The United Nations says that the number of displaced people in Yemen is increasing. Government accuses the Houthis of seizing lands and killing farmers in Hodeidah. This is the end of the news. It was Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.